I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Yeah, everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.
Hey, welcome to HoopSpeak Live. I'm your host, Beckley Mason. Today's show is brought to you by Brian Colangelo because he will pay for anything, it turns out. We've got a guest host today I'm really excited about. He's been doing some work for Grantland. You might know him from HoopSpeak already. Brett
I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Yeah, everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.
Hey, welcome to HoopSpeak Live. I'm your host, Beckley Mason. Today's show is brought to you by Brian Colangelo because he will pay for anything, it turns out. We've got a guest host today I'm really excited about. He's been doing some work for Grantland. You might know him from HoopSpeak already. Brett Koremenos. And our guest today is one of Twitter's finest, your man, Devine. Dan Devine will be on to talk about all the 4-year extensions. But first, Brett, I want to start with Harden. You wrote about him for Grantland today. He looked phenomenal last night. What stuck out to you about his performance?
Well, I think it was the fact that he basically, stopped all the questions of if he could be the man for a team. We talked a little bit, as the game was going on. It was really impressive, his playmaking ability, like his ability to consistently make the 4 guys around him better. And, one of the things I said is that, he gets his points, but they don't come at the expense of team offense. And I think that's something that, maybe with guys like Wade, maybe with guys like Melo, they put up great numbers and sometimes can be very efficient. But at the same time, it does take away from the flow of the offense, guys getting involved and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Harden, I think, is it's interesting. The roster that Morey built, everyone was sort of ridiculing it, but it looks like it makes so much more sense now that Harden is in the fold because, as you say, he makes guys like Ashik a really dangerous offensive player rolling to the basket. And also, who I really thought looked good playing with him was Chandler Parsons because at 6'10" or thereabouts, he can shoot over just about anyone closing out on him on a kick out. And he's also very good at attacking the closeout with these long strides. And Harden is going to attract a lot of attention. And like, I don't know about their depth, but they do have guys who can pick that apart if they get the opportunity.
Yeah, I think what was interesting with Parsons and Lynn to the same degree is a lot of the times when Harden would, create like initial penetration, whether it was off an isolation attack on a pick and roll, when he moved the ball out, like those 2 guys really got into a really good drive and kick game. The ball moved, they were attacking gaps. It was really tough to stop. And now, granted, you're going against the Pistons front line of Monroe and Maxfield, so, you can't take a ton from it. Because their pick and roll defense, even though I thought they used the right schemes against Harden, you're just never going to execute very well when those 2 guys are, involved. But with Parsons and Lynn, the thing that did come up later in the game, and I put it in my Grantland piece, was initially Detroit was sticking to them like they were shooters, and so there was huge gaps for James to drive through. But as the game wore on, Frank was probably getting on his guys to sag off them, and that's going to be the thing that you're going to have to keep an eye on going forward. Can Parsons, can Lynn consistently hit shots and continue to stretch those guys away? Otherwise, Harden is going to have four guys right with feet outside of the paint. And even though he's incredible at getting on top of you and getting to the rim in like 2 seconds off that initial action, it's going to be tougher sledding for him to do that. And I mean, both those guys really could do him a favor and the team a favor if they at least got to league average, about 35%, where when it goes into a scouting report, a coach doesn't label him a driver, they label him as a shooter, and that changes the whole dynamic of how the defense approaches, their scheme.
Yeah, talk about the one thing I'm really curious about with this team is they have Lynn, good pick and roll point guard, and Harden also running pick and rolls. Describe how that taxes a defense when you have two guys who can really get to the rim and you pick and rolls, and you can go on either wing with one of them.
Well, I think what I liked the most was when Lynn was actually involved in the second one. Where Harden would come off the ball screen, maybe it would be like a drag screen in transition, and then the ball would move, and then Lynn would come up and maybe get a second one, and the defense was already shifting. It already had moved over to help, contain Harden's action, and then there's less help, and Lynn was able to just kind of come off and attack. And I think they both can do that for each other. I think with Lynn, it's going to take Mikal and himself to have more of a conscious effort to move the ball out of the first pick and roll, almost treat it like, I hate using it as a decoy where, it gives the impression that he's not looking to do anything with it. But that's essentially what it is. It's coming off, it's collapsing the defense, moving the ball, and then all of a sudden there's another action. And I think if they play off each other like that and Parsons can make shots, it's going to really make them like a really fun team to watch, because it's driving kicks, the ball's moving around the perimeter. You got, Harden is so great at just taking one dribble and all of a sudden being on top of a big guy right in front of the rim. Lynn is so creative with his body and his finishes. Houston's definitely going to be one of those league pass teams that even if they can't stop anybody, because they do put a ton of pressure on Asik to stop people on the other end of the floor. I would say that it's going to still make them a team to watch and a team that could compete for one of those final spots in the East.
Well, certainly in the East, but probably in the West, though, it might be tough to get the 8th seed. But
like 4 hours of sleep trying to get that Harden thing ready. So.
Last night, where Harden and Lynn were kind of at they weren't quite to the wing, they were kind of off the lane line, and they did this thing. You saw it in Dallas, actually, is what it reminded me of, where Harden pump faked, got his man in the air, took a dribble, passed to Lynn, open three, pump fake, got his guy in the air, and then went to the basket. And they kind of just, this nice little chemistry that was great. On the flip side of things, not looking as great, the Los Angeles, what's bothering you the most about how they're playing right now?
Well, again, it's 2 games in, and so the caveat you always have to throw out is it's early, number one, and Howard definitely is not in back in shape.
Right.
I really think that the thing that people, don't get is when you have to have surgery on your back, that's a big deal. Like, you normally, anybody even in the average walk of life would want to try to avoid that type of operation because it's a very sensitive area of the body. It's hard to come back from. I'm not saying that it's going to stop him from getting back to where he was, sure, but it definitely is going to take a longer recovery time for him. And I think 100%. Part of the reason is that he's not the same Dwight Howard. But I do think the other thing is that I'm a big believer in there has to be like an order to your offense. Like, you have to know what your identity is, and then you just build off that. So, you look at some of the championship teams, with Dallas, it was Dirk and pick and rolls, Dirk in the pinch post. When Miami won it last year, it was finally LeBron basically everywhere on the court. He was in pick and rolls, he was in isolations, he was posting up. And then as you go back, even in the Lakers championships, when they last won in 2010, Bynum wasn't fully established yet. So it was still Kobe doing his thing, then Powell doing his thing, and then, oh man, here's Bynum doing really good. And then in 2009, I believe that was the year that Bynum was actually hurt. So it was just Kobe and Gasol. And so there has to be that type of identity. And with them, they have 4 different ways they can go. They can go with Kobe doing his thing, which is mid-post isolations, dominating the basketball. They can go with a spread system where they just spread out shooters and let Nash run pick and rolls. Or they can go with like Orlando did, where it's a 4-out around Dwight Howard, and then they hammer the ball into the post. And I think until they figure out which alpha dog they want to go to, it's going to just cause confusion, because even though they'll run stuff that makes sense, it just doesn't seem like they're very confident in what they're doing.
Yeah, to me, it does remind you a little bit of what Miami went through, not in terms of how they're playing, but just in terms of the awkwardness on the court. It took a while, and now everyone in Miami knows that the first action is going to be LeBron kind of doing his thing, and then the second action is going to be Dwayne Wade charging on the weak side as hard as he can to get to the rim, and that's their offensive rhythm. And then, as Bosch says, Mr. Random. The thing that's really nervous, kind of more nerve-wracking, and what Scott just put on screen gets to this, is that the Heat always, almost from the very beginning, had an elite defense to fall back on. And I don't know if Howard being healthy is going to be enough, because Nash is such a problem. Metta World Priest should be what we call him from now on. But MWP, is not really much of a plus defender in terms of covering a lot of court. And I just wonder if they have sort of the athleticism on the wings to get through games even when they don't score, at a really, really high clip.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing too is that, you mentioned Nash as a problem defender. Gasol's never traditionally been very strong in that area. And, Kobe has fallen from an elite level down to just an above average one. And, Metta is, I think he really is only good against a real physical player at this point. I almost think he's the type of guy that, because of his build and his, now his movement limitations, you need to just use him against power players. So it definitely is an issue. And, you just wonder if at some point they're gonna have to trade talent for fit to make it all work.
Yep. Okay, well, we have a ton to talk about. A lot of deals were made in the NBA, and the guy we're going to bring in to discuss all this, you know him from Ball Don't Lie and on Twitter, Your Man Devine. It is the man himself, Dan Devine. Oh, and that is a good woolly mammoth picture. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing really well, Beckley. Thank you very much. I wish I still had that level of beard, that woolly mammoth status, but I'm doing pretty well, and I'm glad you guys had me back on. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Great to have you back. You did a ton of really interesting preview work for Don't Lie. It probably feels kind of weird now that the season is going. It feels like it was a while ago, but one of the guys who you kind of got into a little bit in your preview, you had a very nice night last night, Greivis Vasquez.
Yeah, I mean, when we were looking at the Hornets, there's obviously going to be a really different team than it was last year. And one of the things that the Hornets were kind of banking on was being able to pair Eric Gordon with, their other lottery pick, Austin Rivers, and sort of like a mix and match backcourt in terms of ball handling. And when it became evident that Gordon wasn't going to be healthy in time for the season, and now who knows when he's going to be healthy, but it became, you start looking at that and saying, well, who are the point guards on this roster? Who can actually handle the ball? And Greivis Vasquez is the name that comes up, and you're like, oh no, that's going to be a real problem. But then you look at his second year, his first year he was in Memphis, and didn't really have, he played a little bit during the regular season, not a ton, and sort of came on during the playoffs. And then his first full season of being able to contribute regularly last season in New Orleans, he improved across the board statistically. He was better in like every category, and given more minutes, he improved the level of his play. So it became kind of surprising to when you looked at that, saying, oh, well, he might not actually be that bad an option for them. And then last night, yeah, he's got 9 assists and no turnovers in the first half against the Spurs. He's, throwing aspirational passes for Al-Farouq Aminu that somehow wind up becoming alley-oops. He might not. I mean, if they're going to have to rely on him more frequently in the first half of the season, and it looks like they might if we don't know what's going on with Gordon, he might not actually be that bad an option. So it was kind of a neat surprise as you dug into the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, Vasquez, the thing that struck me about his performance last night, I mean, he's a very tall guard, 6'6", fine handle. He's not going to, cough it up, getting ripped too much. But he was making the Spurs defense really respect him coming off pick and rolls. And that was one thing I was surprised, and maybe, Brett, you can speak to this, is why do teams treat him like a scoring threat? It seems like all he wants to do is get 12 feet from the rim and pass.
I think it's more of a natural reaction. It's easy for us to logically sit here and say he can't score, but anybody who's even played pickup basketball, realizes that you see a guy driving to the rim, and your initial reaction is to stop him from scoring. And so, it's hard to say just play the pass. It really does, make an effort from the coaching staff, from the player itself, to actually say, okay, these are the things I physically need to do in order to let him, be a scorer instead of just, sucking into his penetration and letting him do what he wants to do initially, which is pass.
Yeah, no, and it's something the Spurs have done kind of historically is force point guards to be scorers. They did it to Chris Paul, and they did it to Nash in the playoffs memorably. So maybe this is just a one-off game, first game of the year. Okay, let's talk extensions. Whew, some really interesting ones. To me, the most interesting it might be Steph Curry's at $4 and $44 million. The health risks are there, but also hell of a player. Dan, what was your first thought when you saw that?
Those ankles better be healthy. Because the reality is when he's available to play, that offense goes through the roof. I mean, as a rookie, when he was paired with Ellis for first a year and a half with Ellis, when he was on the court, they were, I think, the 11th best offense in the league his rookie year and the 9th best offense in the league his sophomore year, or at least that they produced at a level that would be commensurate with that kind of finish. And then last year, it was ridiculous. I mean, they were the second best, produced at a second highest efficiency when he was on the court. So, I mean, and that's without having Ellis for a lot of it, and that's without, a lot of sort of other real threats around him in that offense. So you look at the improvements that they've made this year. A guy like Klay Thompson coming on, a guy who can finish around the basket and Bogut, some improved offensive players around him, and you say if he can be on the court, that offense can be insane. But then the problem is a guy sprained his ankle 5 times in the space of a week and a half or whatever, and paying him $11 million a year is kind of a dicey proposition. If he's healthy, it's a steal, I think, and if he can't stay on the court with the ankle, then obviously it's going to be a problem for them going forward.
I think one thing too with the Curry thing, and I don't know if you agree with this, Dan, but I've been pretty vocal for the people that unfortunately have to follow me on Twitter about how I would almost consider paying my training staff more than my head coach, just because of the way that physical movement is very important. I mean, do you think that, that type of thing, I mean, I don't know, what your thoughts are on that, but I mean, that's basically what the Warriors are banking on. They're banking on that their training staff is going to keep Curry upright, and Bogut, with this money. I mean, is that something that, I mean, you think is an acceptable risk in terms of that extension?
Well, I think, you have to be right on your training staff. They haven't had a whole heck of a lot of success to date in keeping him on the court. So, I mean, that's a bit of you want to, you bet on your people. That's, it's got to make them feel really nice. But in terms of actual, something you can rely on, that's a little dicey to me. But yeah, I mean, it's an acceptable risk because you don't get elite shooting and facilitating talent in one package at a relatively inexpensive amount. I mean, $11 million a year is somewhere where you can afford that kind of price point. You're not paying him $15 million a year. You're not giving him a max deal. But
Right.
yeah, you need to be right on your staff. I think you're absolutely right that that's something that the teams should really be spending more money on. If Phoenix has taught us anything, it's that you can get a lot out of guys that have been injury prone in the past if you have a training staff that can keep them on the court.
Yeah, there's one of my favorite points, kind of like aphorisms that Henry Abbott has is about an amount that's too much to pay Phoenix's training staff. Like if you were the Lakers, I guess Lakers have VD, who's great, but like if you were a team with money, is there an amount that would be too much to like know that your players were going to be as healthy as possible all the time? I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer, but a lot of teams, cut costs there. Okay, another one I want to talk about because it's just like baffling to me. DeMar DeRozan, 4 years, $42 million. This is a serious contract that they're basically going to be replacing Jose Calderon's contract with when Calderon expires. And I'm just wondering from you guys, do you think that this is two-time Executive of the Year Brian Colangelo, so maybe we shouldn't get too fired up, but it just seems to me like a really, as you might say, aspirational contract.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you're banking on. It's understandable to make a bet that your player is going to improve between the ages of 23 and 27. Like that makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to me to assume that a guy who has, no matter how much work he's put into his game, his on-court production has decreased in each of his 3 seasons. He hasn't shown to be an improved shooter. He's not. We know he's a slasher that can get to the rim, and so does every defense in the league. So they don't really respect him with his outside shot. He tried to take a ton of mid-range shots last season to take advantage of the fact that they were, sort of sucking in against him, and wasn't able to produce at a reasonable enough level to make that a good idea. So I mean, he can put a lot of work into his game. I know he's a hard worker, and I know that he's respected for that. But he's going to have to go a long way to earn this deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan, you just hit it right on the head. I mean, you're basically paying for him to get and it's totally on. There's nothing that screams that he's done in the past that he's going to all of a sudden just flip a switch and be worth that kind of money. I mean, to me, it was just mind-boggling because the only thing I could maybe see, I don't know if you could, if you see this too, is if he just is a great character dude and they just see him working hard and they just figure the breakthroughs on his way. Is that maybe the only thing that you could see them that, thinking as they threw this money at him?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It seems to me that you tend to maybe, over-evaluate your players' talents, or you overblow their flaws. And it seems like, when you see them every day, when it's a guy that's in the facility all the time, working with your coaches, and by all accounts, they absolutely love the way that he approaches his work, the way he tries to work on his game, the way he's been, the effort he puts in. And it's just really weird when you hear that a guy over the course of his age, 21, 22, 23 seasons, hasn't had a demonstrable improvement on the court, especially on things that are, a lot of them, obviously, as defense is not all effort. There is technique to it. There's strategy to it. There's things that you have to think your way through. But a lot of that is, effort based. If you're someone that's working hard and has athletic talent to be able to put into that stuff, you get results back. And someone that's 6'7" with that kind of wingspan and that kind of speed and quickness should be able to shut dudes down outside. And he's not that guy. So, maybe it's the kind of deal where when it comes, it's all going to come at once, and he's going to go from 15 points per 36 minutes to a 25-point a game score that locks dudes up. But I don't see it. That's if that happens in 3 years, then yeah, they got the absolute steal of the deadline. But I'm not sure I buy it yet.
Yeah, I think that maybe this is also just hoping that Dwayne Casey will work some magic here and mold a defender, a D and 3 guy out of him. If he's elite quickness, D and 3, then it's, becomes a little less reprehensible. I want to talk about Taj. So Taj is like a really weird extension because he's so old. Most of these guys who are getting extended are like 23. Taj, I think, is already 28, 27. So he's basically, you're paying for his prime years now. For the other guys, you're paying for like those pre-prime years. So they're fun, but they're the pre-prime. And I think that Taj is like, is a fascinating concept to me because he's such an amazing defensive player, and specifically so many teams could benefit from a guy who really can play, the 4 and 5, rebounds really well, makes it 15-footers. He's basically like he's like what they want Serge Ibaka to be, but Serge will be more athletic. And I wonder, did that just scream to you, like, is there price fixing on defensive guys? Like, what's going on there with that contract?
Well, I think that there's two things. I think definitely the defense is not evaluated on the same level as offense, certainly. So a guy that's got that has shown legitimate skills defensively, but is not like someone that can also, prove to be a 15 to 18 point a game kind of scorer, which Gibson has some nice offensive game, but is not that kind of guy. They're going to be undervalued on the market just because defense sort of tends to be undervalued. Despite the fact that it's half the game, and for Gibson, I think the age thing plays into it, but it's I think you're absolutely right. It's weird to me, like if you're paying and you're projecting out what someone's going to be able to produce and be worth, I would see to me that you have a much better idea of what Taj Gibson is now and what he will be over the course of the next 3 or 4 years than you would just about any of those other guys. So if you're not going to pay, it's my colleague Kelly Dwyer probably he tends to dislike it when the Bulls go off in their decision making about why they won't pay certain guys and how they'll pay certain guys. But this seems to be like a pretty fair value for someone that's going to be really valuable for them over the course of the next few years. Especially if he just if the worst things that he does is he doesn't hit mid-range jumpers continually, and he continues to look a little bit like a supervillain with that like gaunt face and goatee situation, then you can live with that. That's worth like $9-10 million a year to be easy.
Yeah, and also I like. Okay, so this is a good question. Did you see Jared Bayless last night?
I saw a little bit of Bayless last night.
Okay. So people were saying he looks like now the most evil player in the NBA. He's got like the arched eyebrows, shaved his head, and has the thing. Is he Taj Gibson's mini-me or is he Boozer's mini-me? This is perhaps the most important question in the NBA right now.
Well, I think that depends largely on how much head paint Boozer's going to use over the course of the season, because that can really change his look and add a little bit of dynamism to the mini-me conversation. I think either way, as long as either Gibson or Bayless winds up saying "seize him, you fools" over the course of the next 3-4 months, then we're all going to be in for a grand treat.
Yeah, Bayless was so jarring to me. I don't know why. I haven't been able to get over it. It's like when he was sneering and stuff. He just looks like a bad guy, like the cartel owner in a Fast and Furious movie or something.
Well, I think that a part of what was so jarring is that no one's seen him in a couple of years since he went to Toronto. So it was just really weird to see him again, and especially that that he has this sort of arch look now.
All right, quickly, let's just get your take. I assume that you are down with Lawson for 4 and 44. So I think we're all in agreement that that's great for the Nuggets, and Lawson did fine. He's not getting kind of Rondo. He's kind of in that Parker Rondo range, and that seems relatively fair for both sides. Although I think Ty could probably have gotten more on the open market. The Drew Holiday 4 and 41 though, I think is really interesting because he's talking max, and people have kind of been waiting for him to become that super guard. And he's just settling into Philadelphia for 4 and 41. What do you guys make of that?
I'd say it's weird. They just got out of a situation where they had, where the Sixers had a super talented athletic guy who didn't really seem to be a dominant player, who they were kind of waiting on becoming this iconic figure for them that didn't really live up to the contract that they had spent on him. And now they got rid of Andre Iguodala, and now they want to overpay overpay Drew Holiday. It's kind of like, I think there's a lot to like about Drew Holiday's game, but it doesn't make any sense to me that he would be getting, $3 million less over the course of his contract than Ty Lawson, given what we've already seen Ty Lawson be able to produce in terms of offense and running the team. Holiday could be a plus defender, but yeah, I think it's much more likely that deal works out to be a negative than a net positive.
Dan, what do you think, though? I know there's a little bit of a narrative in this last year about the fact that Doug Collins, kind of keeps him under wraps. Like, he doesn't really let him free to do his thing. Collins shows this weird amount of trust in Evan Turner, but yet you almost don't see the same leash with Holiday. I mean, do you think that maybe, if Collins ends up, burning out this year or kind of unleashes him, is there a possibility that he lives up to the contract then?
Well, first off, it's a weird combination of things, because if I don't know that I see Doug Collins relenting ever in any situation, but specifically now, I don't know that I see it with the way he handles his a young point guard, and I don't know that. So you're kind of having a situation where you're almost like betting that you're going to wind up firing your coach in order for your point guard to wind up being the best version of himself that he can be, which seems like a weird match to me. But with that said, I think that the most consistent thing that Holiday showed toward the end of last season was they were better when he attacked. They were better when he got to the rim, when he looked for his own offense. And because one of three things was going to happen: either he was going to get to the rim against defenders that were not as quick as him, he was going to be able to suck in and then do like a pick and or a driving kick and get somebody an open mid-range shot with some of those bigs that could hit it, or he was going to get fouled and they were going to get into the bonus. So if he continues to press that issue, then yeah, he could be a much more improved offensive player. But to this point, I think it's hard to project what he's going to be in 3 years if you don't know what kind of system he's going to be allowed to run. There's certainly talent there, but it seems like a dicey deal from this point.
Right. Yeah, I think especially it's a weird contract because he seems like not the right point guard for Bynum. He seems like the kind of point guard for, Ashik, a guy who's going to set screens and dive down the middle of the court. He doesn't, to me, seem like a good, dribble it down, force feed it to the guy, then, clear through to the corner and wait to shoot a three. I mean, he can do those things fine, but it just seems like the whole direction of the franchise is, for Collins is really big players. He really wanted Kwame Brown, remember? I'm sure he was dying to get Bynum, and that fits with guys like Darrell Wright. But, Drew Holiday, if you're going to make him your franchise point guard, I think that's I don't know. I'm worried about that because Bynum hates to run pick and rolls, basically. Okay, Dan, I think we have to let you go, but I'm really glad that we're in the same cool sweater club and that you could come on today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Dan.
Thanks, guys, for having me back.
That was awesome, though. Dan Devine, one of the dudes around in person and on Twitter. Follow him at Your Man Devine. Read him at Ball Don't Lie. Brett, let's do Dagger Smash Noted and just cruise here. So my dagger is going to be Carlos Boozer making the game-winning play last night, getting the offensive rebound and putting it back in. I think Booz has gotten a lot of crap over the Chicago, but they're going to appreciate him a little more without Derrick Rose just because, he does good things, especially on offense, and they're going to need that.
Well, while I can't channel Zach's impossible anger for this segment, my smash is going to be, we've seen so far, LeBron in space and how destructive he is, and we've seen how destructive James Harden can be in space, and yet these teams continue, and it drives me crazy, to build these rosters with guys that can't spread the floor around their elite penetrators and their star players. It drives me nuts. I really hope front offices catch on and realize that more space equals more exciting and fun basketball, for junkies like me and then just for even casual fans.
All right, James, we got Peepin' James. Peepin' James wrote a great article about Paul George. You can go check that out on Hardwood Paroxysm. James, give us the noted, wise sage of HoopSpeak Live.
Thanks, Beckley. Well, my note is that I was going to come on here and talk about Kyle Lowry and how I really enjoyed watching him play last night and how we basically stole him from Zach. Zach loves Kyle Lowry. He doesn't get to watch him in person. Like, I'm going to get to watch him a bunch, and that's awesome. But when Brett did his smash, he mentioned that James Harden is destructive in space. And now all I can think about is his beard going up into space. He's an astronaut, and he's doing his thing. And that's all I can think about right now. I have nothing to say about Kyle Lowry anymore.
All right, well, good noted from old Peepin' James. Astro Beard, excellent. Thank you, Curtis Harris. Why don't we take us out with a little more Roger Bain? Thank you, everyone who watched. Thanks to Brett for filling in and co-hosting. Congratulations to him on doing some work for Grantland this season. It's going to be excellent. You can follow him on Twitter at Koremenos. Roger Bain, take us out.
I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.